The Wellspring of Good. This book contains the last spoken words of the spiritual teacher Beinsa Duno, with the secular name Peter Deneuve, who lived in Bulgaria between the years 1864 and 1944. Read by Reverend Laurie Shadd. Prologue. The Home of Temelko. When the air raids over the city of Sofia started in November 1943, the Master went every day with a group of followers to the Vitosha Mountains. He was deep in thought. He hardly spoke and would spend the entire day there. Whatever the weather, he climbed the mountain with steady, rhythmic steps. In deep silence, he accomplished a work of great importance. 42 times did the Master walk to the mountain. When infused with the Spirit, movements on the material plane can have wondrous power. When destruction struck the city and people were overwhelmed by fear, panic, and terror, the Master said, "The conditions for people to maintain their communion with God no longer exist in this place. Let us depart." He said this with sadness and distress, as if he wanted to say, "There is no longer air and sunshine here. Let us leave." After a massive bombing on January 10th, 1944, the very next day, Beinsa Duno and a group of followers retreated to a nearby village called Marchivo, to the home of a follower named Temelko. The Master created a small world in which the sky above was clear, the sun was shining, and one could breathe freely. The stormy waves crashed upon its firm shores and were powerless to interfere with the radiant peace that reigned there. In those days of fear and hardship, many people found refuge, support, consolation, and encouragement there. They renewed their strength to endure the tribulations. All of this is passed on in the talks presented in The Wellspring of Good. The Great Omniscient Cause. Reveal yourself to me in your way, and as is your will. A prayer of the disciple. It had been snowing for a few days. Everything had disappeared under the white cover. The houses of the village had almost disappeared as well. When the paths were shoveled, the disciples returned to the house for lunch. In spite of the snow, there were again many guests. After lunch, we sang some songs and then went outside. The air was cold, clean, and revitalizing. The Master took a deep breath out of the refreshing air, looked around, and then gazed toward the blue sky. He rested his gaze on the careworn faces of the people and said, "Everything comes from God. People ask, 'Where is God?' God is in the air. Through the air that enters you, God gives you life. God, the great omniscient cause, is in the water, is in the light, is in the bread. You abide in God. With the light, He loves and caresses you. God reveals Himself through the sun, through the fruit, but we do not comprehend Him. Whenever we are weak, God is within that weakness. Sometimes we think that we are very independent, when in reality, we have entered into God, and it is His strength that we are feeling. Whenever we think that we are strong, God puts us at the opposite polarity, weakness. Yet when we become humble, He uplifts us. What kind of mind is this that provides for every sun in the universe? There exists a silent caressing breeze that we call the breath of God. As for me, the day is meaningful only insofar as I can see God, who is hidden within nature. The meaning of life. This morning, we climbed the high conical peak above the village with our beloved Master. The snow was soft and powdery. It was the first snow of the winter. When we reached the peak, the sun was just peeking out from behind the mountain ridge. It warmed and softened the air that was still chilly from the night before. On the mountain, bright calmness reigned. It was one of those moments when the unity and harmony of the wondrous mysteries of life become evident. When the great life touches human souls, it reconciles and erases all differences. The radiance of the one life envelops and permeates everything. After we had spread out whatever we had upon the snow, we sat around our beloved Master. The winter sun was shining warmly. It caressed us like the gentle hand of a mother. The Master said, "People ask me if I have been to the world beyond. I do not visit the world beyond. I live in it. They ask, 'Have you been to see God?' I have not been to see God. I abide in God, and I study God within everything, within the stones, the plants, the animals, the water, the air, and the light. God is present within everything that lives. Within the least, as well as within the greatest, I can see God. I am glad and rejoice when I hear God's still small voice. You expect to see God when you die. If you live in worldliness, after you die, you will remain on earth. Some people say that they want to see God. Are you not seeing the manifested light of God? It is the manifestation of the angels, of God. From now on, work continuously at feeling God's presence at all times and within all things. When you arrive at the summit of a mountain in the morning, see God there. Everything that is outside of us, everything that is inside of us, everything that surrounds us, represents a form through which the great sentient cause manifests. Behind me, above me, around me is God. As long as you think about God, God is before you. As soon as you stop thinking about God, God is behind you. Truly, it is better when God is before you. In times of man's greatest trials, suffering, and hardship, God is made manifest to him in one form or another and will help him to commune with the rocks, the plants, the animals, the wind, the whole of nature. This is a privilege for man. Why? Because all things originate from God. When man lives within the divine sphere, he sees God everywhere and within everything. Once he departs from this sphere, he becomes confused. When I speak about God, I refer to the sacred, the one reality, which can be experienced everywhere. If you search for him, you will experience him within all people, as well as within the animals, the plants, the air, and the water. Let everyone to whom you speak understand that the God of whom you speak has not been inherited from your grandmother or your grandfather, but that you have had a great experience, and your internal light is a result of this experience. The Master declared, "To live for God and to see his life in all beings, even to enter into the consciousness of an ant, is truly great. While on earth, you cannot understand or relate to this, But when you are in the sublime world, the world of consciousness, you will understand. To see God means to strive toward that supreme eternal law that rejuvenates man and gives him new life, and that brings light and warmth to him. If people consider it to be a privilege to meet and converse with a great poet or philosopher, how much greater a privilege it is to have the opportunity to see God. Do you know what it means to see God? This is the meaning of life. It is a great thing to connect with this supreme intelligence. You will first find God in the least of things, in crystals, in well springs, in flowers, and only then in the greatest of things. There are people who do not like it when one speaks to them about God, and yet, when you meet a person like this, you will see that he is in need of God. Tell him, you never go out into the light, and for this reason you are frail and anemic. Do not speak to him about God. After that, tell him, you need fresh air. Breathe deeply, otherwise you will become ill. On another occasion, tell him, your blood is impure. You need to improve the food you eat, otherwise you will become ill. People perceive God as an abstraction, and yet God is the one reality. The air and the light are the means through which you can have immediate and unlimited access to God. Life is the musical manifestation of God. The luncheons with the Master were held in common and usually ended in song. We sang in unison. The harmony came from differences in the tone of the voices. Music gives to man the opportunity to concentrate and focus, to feel the great harmony and unity of life. The Master said, "It is said that God created man in his image and likeness. In this case, man represents a divine book. Through the study of man, one can come to understand nature. You cannot love anything that is not divine. What you do not understand still brings joy, but what you do understand is merely the outer wrapping of the unknown. The one who does not understand the unknown is not ignorant, but the one who does not investigate it is. Even when you investigate the unknown, it will still remain a mystery to you. The great omniscient cause emerges and manifests through multiplicity. Why did God desire to create the world? To manifest himself. You need not search for God in the world beyond. He exists in this world as well as in the world beyond. All beings are included within him. When you think about God, you will experience the most sublime, as well as life in its wholeness. To be in harmony with God is to understand the wholeness of life. When you are disposed in this way, can you say that the world is not good? Everything that God has created has value, but man does not appreciate what surrounds him. The essence of life is what creates the forms. The unknown is what creates. The known is the vehicle of the unknown. Only one master exists in the world. This is God, the one reality to whom man can pray, from whom everything is received. God is invested in every human being. This investment is found in the mind of man, in his thoughts, yet its fulfillment is implanted in his heart. Someone owes you something, but insists that he does not. Yet within himself, he knows that he is indebted to you, no matter what he has said to deny it. The same is true for those who deny the existence of God. Within their hearts, they know that God exists. People say that no one has ever seen God. This is true for the physical world. You say that you have not seen God, nor have you seen the angels. You have seen God and the angels, but you have been blind. This is all. The day will come when all the people in the world will see the manifestations of God. There is a hell, but God has not created this hell. There is a paradise as well, but God has not created this paradise. God has created something much greater. Be perfect. Someone asked the Master, "What is the new way of doing God's work?" The Master explained, "We need to participate in God's work. That is, we need to think, feel, and act as God does. We need to work with nature in a new way. That is to say, as God works. He works in an all-perfect way. God is long-suffering. We should be patient. God is all-knowing. We should be wise. God is all-loving. We should be loving. God is all-powerful. We should be strong. It is God who gives us the impulse to think and to work. You feel low. God uplifts you. You feel despair and wish to die. God gives you the impulse to live. You do not want to work. God from within you says, "Go and work." I aspire that my thoughts and intentions be in accordance with God's intentions. I do not wish the weather to change because of me, but I subject myself to the weather that the great omniscient cause has ordained. What is man's task? Continuous self-development and self-perfection. God is the continuous manifestation of perfection, and man is the continuous self-improvement on the path to perfection. This is the meaning of the scripture, "You therefore are to be perfect, even as your heavenly Father is perfect." From Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. Man needs to continuously correct his imperfections on the path to perfection. The love of the One. There were days when the home of Brother Temelko was filled with guests. People came from the city as well as from all parts of the countryside. Everyone wished to see the Master, to speak with him, to receive instructions as well as encouragement and advice. The Master received guests privately or in groups in his small room, where he listened to them and spoke with them. The luncheons were held in common, as with a family. The small dining room was overfilled with guests, and the sisters served. After lunch, we usually sang a few songs, and then the Master would speak. One brother asked, "During these unsettled times, what should the brothers and sisters do?" To this the Master replied, "Study the lectures and sermons. One needs to start from the very beginning and apply them. Every word is given under a particular conjunction of the planets and the sun. We are influenced by the celestial bodies, the earth, the sun, and the central sun as well. And in every position of these three celestial bodies, and the remaining ones as well, the idea and the word of God is made manifest in a specific way." Then the Master explained, "God has given to all beings what is essential. However, cases exist in which the human soul passes from one state into another. During these transient phases, gloom and darkness can penetrate man's consciousness until he again enters into the divine consciousness, into love, in which light and joy abide. It is necessary for man to pass through these transient states as a condition for his evolution. During these intermediate conditions, he again dwells within the realm of love, but the clouds of his consciousness prevent him from seeing the light. Therefore, when you are sad, you should realize that you are passing from one state of your consciousness into another. This passing from the human consciousness to the divine always brings something new. Someone says, "I experience much suffering." The greater and the longer the suffering is, the greater and stronger the states of joy and love will be that will come as a consequence of the first state. This can be verified. It is not an abstraction, but science. Man needs to see God's love within the least things. When God created the world, he held man in his mind, heart, soul, and spirit. Because of this, man needs to look at the creation of the world as a sacred act of love, and he should be ready to make every sacrifice for his Creator. When all abandon you and you remain alone, you need to understand that there is one who is with you. God will tell you, "You are not alone. Be still. I am with you always." Not one of you has had this experience of terrible loneliness. The only being who thinks of us in every moment, without ever forgetting us, not even for a single instant, is God, the Great One, toward whom everyone should strive. The only purpose of suffering, of the misery of life, is for us to come to experience God's great love and to know that Providence will deliver us from all the suffering and misery of life. This we will come to understand at the end of all times. All trials through which you pass at present are for the sole purpose of coming to know God, the primary cause. And when you come to know him, joy will appear. Someone thinks that he has been forgotten. This is a misunderstanding. No one can remove you from the divine consciousness. The minute that someone thinks that he is a separate being, he creates his own adversity. That person who is one with the divine has a distinctive quality. He possesses no fear. He does not consider what might happen to him, nor what people might think of him. One's strength lies in his faith in divine order. Externally, God withdraws from us that he may not disturb us, and yet, internally, he enters into us that he may encourage us. Much turmoil might happen in the world. Downfalls and advances alike might happen to people. And yet, no matter what situation they might find themselves in, God continues to keep one and the same relationship with them. You die, God gives you a blessing. You do something wrong, still God gives you a blessing. All suffering and joy ensue from God's love. Why? You do not understand his love, and in not understanding it, you pass through suffering. There is no greater joy than to realize that you are alive, that there is one who loves you. From within, he tells you, "Fear not, I will arrange everything for you. The day will come when you will receive my blessing." If you could go to one of the higher worlds, you would find there many who love you and who are sending their good thoughts and feelings to you. He who comes to understand God's love will never ask who God is. If you were to amass the love of all of humankind, of all the saintly, good, and righteous people, of all the angels and the heavenly deities, their love would represent but a minute part of God's love. I say, blessed are the people, because God loves them. In this lies your misfortune. You are not aware of God's love for you. One thing is expected of you, that you realize that he who loves you does everything for your good. God's love lies in his constant giving. This is called influx. When the opposite process takes place, life becomes meaningless. As long as this influx from his life to ours occurs, we are enlivened and joyful. Why did God create you? So that there would be someone to love. Why are we on the earth? So that we may come to know how to love God. As long as man is not connected with God, he resembles one who is stranded on a desert island. Only the infinite is able to close the door to negative forces, the door to the bad conditions. God's greatness does not lie in the creation of the suns and the galaxies. This he can accomplish in a single instant. And yet, you are sad. Everyone is pushing you around. You need a little help. Everyone who passes by you says, "Nothing will come of this person." And yet, God, the creator of the universe, stops his work, descends without being noticed, and whispers to you, "Fear not, do not be discouraged. I will help you. Even today, I will settle your affairs." And you will have a great flash of joy. These are the great things that God does. This is the great truth. I speak of the God who visits people in their broken and sorrowful hearts. He lifts the downcast to the summit of divine consciousness, that they may do as all do, breathe pure air and absorb divine light. Every being is a unique form through which the divine consciousness manifests. Therefore, God watches over each form as he would over a delicate flower, that the divine may manifest through it. What is eternal bliss? Eternal bliss is the sum of countless small blessings that flow continuously, like a wellspring, composed of countless small droplets that come one after another without interruption. The Great One has a particular quality. Those who hate him, he draws to himself the most. The evil in the world is due to our lack of understanding of the conditions in which we find ourselves. God is not angry with us because of our errors. It offers him the opportunity to manifest his mercy toward us and correct them. After 5 or 6 years have passed, you will come to understand the consequences of your errors and will make amends. For example, consider a person who builds a nice home and rents it to some tenants who manage to ruin it within a year. I interpret this as follows. God has created the world very sensibly, but we ruin it and search for the cause outside of ourselves instead of within. The law states, God loves all beings equally, but not all benefit from his love. Some are aware of this, and yet others are not. God loves human beings as much as the angels, but the difference is that the angels are aware of God's love and are open to receiving it, whereas human beings are not always aware of it. Consider those foolish people who build a house but put only one small window in it. Others build a house with large windows through which abundant light passes. You might say, "Look how this person is showered with abundance." This is so because his windows are larger. Depending upon the size of the window that you open, that much light and that much air will enter. God's blessings, the light and the air, will enter of their own accord as soon as you open up. And yet, they will enter only as much as your window permits. In this same way, you will receive the power and blessings of the divine world according to how open the windows of your consciousness and your soul are. God's blessings infuse all beings. Inferior beings cannot contain them. All would flow out. We need to become still as the motionless surface of the water that God's image may be reflected in us. If He is reflected in us, we will progress. If the image of God is not reflected within, we will remain such as we are. We need to be pure that God's image may be reflected in us. Peace and purity are the two conditions for God's image to be reflected in us. As long as we do not believe in God, we are not able to receive His love. God never lets blind people spread His light. God withdraws His gifts from the foolish man, so that others will withdraw their trust in Him and not be deceived. God will place the foolish one in bed so that he cannot lie and abuse another's confidence. Sometimes people think that God is angry with us. We think that God is angry with us, while in reality, we are the angry ones. We see our image in God and say that He is angry with us. Set aside this delusion. God is not a God of anger. God is the God of love. Because we become angry, we think that God too is angry. This is our concept. When God punishes you, this punishment is His lesson that we may revert to the right course. I will tell you a great truth. To every being, God manifests His love in a specific way. God's love for every being is specific. Pure and impure food. Some of the brothers raised a question about food. The master responded, "The danger exists that we might stumble in our development if we do not know how to eat, how to drink water, how to breathe, and how to assimilate food. Man possesses an inner sense that advises him regarding the kind of food he should take, and if he permits this sense to guide him, he will choose his food properly. Man can re-establish this sense when he lives a life of purity. Why should one not overeat? Because a great portion of brain energy goes to the stomach, and the brain cannot complete its work. When man overeats, he squanders most of brain energy on the work of the stomach. There needs to be a certain amount of reserve energy for the brain. By consuming vegetarian food, one becomes more purified. Meat contains more toxins and makes a person coarse and primitive. When animals are slaughtered, the fear that they experience forms terrible toxins in their organisms. The people who eat this meat assimilate these toxins into their system, and as a result, disease states appear, especially neurasthenia. One of the reasons for the existence of disease is the indiscriminate slaughter of animals. The one who wants to enter into the race of love needs to, through inner persuasion, give up eating meat. Man needs to recreate his organism. Should he not be able to do so, he will continue to live with animal instincts for a long time. When water comes to a boil, an expansion occurs within it. As a result, prana electromagnetism is released, and then the water can be more easily assimilated by man. It is very interesting to observe how sentient nature purifies water. When it evaporates and rises to the higher strata of the atmosphere, the water breaks down into hydrogen and oxygen. In this way, it is completely revitalized. After that, the hydrogen and oxygen reunite through electricity. The water dies and is reborn, as does man, so that it may be renewed. When we hold a piece of bread in our hands, we should be filled with gratitude for the sacrifice that it makes. Go deep within yourself, contemplate and say, "I desire to sacrifice myself as the bread does." When you eat an apple, put your love into it, empathize with the tree on which it grew, and your soul will contact the advanced beings who have worked on its development. If you come to love the apple and receive it into yourselves, you will improve your energy more than you would have had you worked upon yourself for an entire year. The Wellspring. Not far from the village there was a wellspring of mineral water. Its plentiful water meandered away. The water was warm, soft, and flavorful. The master drank from it, and finding it excellent, recommended it to everyone. There were some nice meadows on the sapling-covered slopes surrounding the wellspring. We often went there with the master. The countryside was unpretentious and pleasant. The grass was growing, the leaves on the trees were unfurling, and the flowers were blooming, each in its time. The birds sang, and life pulsated with its measured and steady rhythm. The master's thoughts were a translation of the great book of nature. Within it, the one eternal rhythm of the one life was made known. The master said, "What causes man to rejoice the most is God. Everything that inspires you is God. What gives you vitality, encouragement, and strength in every moment is God. God is present in all of this. A great sentient idea can only be born out of the bond between two sentient beings. This is the law. We need to have a connection with God for a sentient idea to arise within us. All thoughts that flow through the mind, all feelings and desires that flow through the heart come from a great wellspring. This wellspring is the soul. The wellspring of the soul is fed by an even greater wellspring. This is the Divine Spirit. The wellspring of the Divine Spirit is fed by a still greater wellspring that is the absolute unknown, the Spirit of creation. Every thought that brings the essence of love to the human soul comes from God. Every thought that brings the light of wisdom comes from God. Every thought that brings the freedom of truth to the human soul comes from God. Everything that does not come from God carries within itself poison and death. This is because everyone who does not receive divine thought experiences suffering and death. Through all the angels, through all advanced beings, God's love is manifested, but to a different degree. Love, therefore, comes from one source, from one center. If you desire to go where love is, you need to go to the eternal wellspring, to God. We cannot come to know love apart from God. You are a door through which God enters to teach you how to love. He is the only one who can show you how to love. Allow yourself to be taught by the one alone. It is said in the scriptures, God is our teacher. At this point there's a footnote. Compare with John chapter 3 verse 2. Rabbi, we know that you, that is Jesus Christ, are a teacher come from God. End footnote. He who permits God to teach him will be dressed in the most beautiful of clothes. The life of the person who is in accord with divine law is pure poetry, music, and song. He is brave, resolute, and filled with noble and sublime feelings. Should a person part with this law, he will become mistrustful, with concerns about everything, fear for his life, fearful that old age is coming and that he lacks sufficient resources, and so on. Pay attention to the least impulse. The small thoughts and feelings that manifest through you, these come from God. Where is God? God is in all those places where love, wisdom, truth, life, knowledge, and freedom are present. His presence gives us the most beautiful experience of the Spirit. It refreshes us and uplifts us. Some people say, "Let God set the world right." God has inscribed His word within people's hearts, and in doing so, He has already set right. It now remains for what He has written within man to be made manifest. Unity in love. The Master spoke to his disciples. Show gratitude and appreciation toward everyone who helps you. Love comes from God. He who loves you is a transmitter of God's love. Someone might brag that he has done you a favor, that he has done some good for you. He is not telling the truth. Christ tells us, "I have come not to do my will, but the will of him who sent me." From John chapter 6, verse 38. Within you dwells a misunderstanding, a lack of contentment. This is due to your not understanding that love is unified, undivided. It is naive to think that two or more people love you. One alone exists in the world who can love you, no one else. Some think that many people love them, their father, mother, brothers, sisters, and friends. In reality, this is not so. If you think that many people love you, this is only because it appears to be so. You are loved by only one, God. As soon as God comes to love you, all people will love you. This is a true story about two young people who loved each other. After they had been living together for 10 years, the man noticed that his partner was beginning to see his weaknesses and starting to criticize him. So he disguised himself as a young man and began to flirt with her, writing her love letters. The woman said to her husband, "I know men who are refined and with noble character." He agreed with her and admitted that he was not so refined. Sometimes the man, while in his disguise, would say to his wife, "Your husband is a very good man. Love him." Through all who love you, it is one being alone who is loving you. This is God. Since love is indivisible, when someone tries to divide love, suffering is born. Man thinks, feels, and acts, but he needs to realize that it is God who is working from within. If for a second he allows himself to think that he is doing everything by himself, then he is on the wrong path. Someone accomplishes something and imagines that he is the author. However, out of affected piety, he says, "God did this." No, man needs to be honest with himself and admit that God is working from within him. Man can be compared to a letter carrier who opens his mailbag, takes out a letter, and hands it to you. When he arrives at another place, again, he opens his mailbag and delivers another letter. This is how he serves people. You might think that by carrying letters and handing them out, you will become poor. No, you will become wealthy. You fill the mailbag with letters and you are wealthy. When you deliver the letters, you become poor in order to fill the mailbag again. By delivering a letter to the people whom you love, you befriend them. You have not written the letters, you only deliver them. So often we say, "My love." It is important to return to the unifying love, that is, to the love of God, to let this love manifest through us. Man needs to come into contact with the clean air, not the unclean. By clean air, I mean the all-embracing divine love. By unclean air, I mean love with admixtures. God wants something of us now. He does not demand it by law. We need to discover what it is that God is asking of us. When you love someone, do you not want to know what they are like? God, who has come to love us, makes accommodations to do things on our terms. For thousands and millions of years until now, it has been God who has been making the accommodations. As He accommodates us, we also need to accommodate Him. Here is how this will come to pass. Man needs to have an excellent mind through which God is able to manifest, an excellent heart through which God is able to manifest, and an excellent soul through which God is able to manifest. You love a person for his enlightened mind. This is 1/3 of the truth. You love someone for his heart. This is also 1/3 of the truth. When you come to divine love, it embraces all things. In this case, you love the divine, God, within man. The border between two epochs. The master would go for a walk almost every morning, accompanied by friends. No matter what the weather would be, he would not miss going out. He loved to be in the open, walking in the sun. He moved quickly and with ease. His attention was vigilant for each wonder of the beauty surrounding us. Sometimes, during such morning outings, the master would shed light on questions that would arise. On one such outing, the question about evolution and involution was raised. The master answered, "Involution is turning away from God, and evolution is returning to God. Involution is leaving home and going to work. Evolution is returning home from work with the experience that one has acquired. Moving down means moving into darkness. Climbing up is rising toward the light." The story of the fall of man into error is one of the great mysteries of life. This story has a symbolic bearing upon the issue of involution. It concerns the time when man was with God and dwelt among the angels. He alone wanted to come down to earth to learn. People descended to earth to study, and when they had come to the unfavorable constraining conditions, they began to think about their Father, about God. God understands man's nature, and for this reason, he did not give him immortality, allowing all who do not fulfill his will to age. When he sent man to earth, God began to take away from him what he possessed. This is a consequence of the involutionary process. For as long as you were outside of the material world, you were idealists. You strived toward God and desired to sacrifice, to share everything. Nevertheless, when you descended into the material world, you forgot everything. In the process of descending, you lost something. You must return to that state in which you were at the beginning. Since ancient times, many beings have lost their primordial sublime life. The infinite love of God strives to permeate them, so he may restore the life and light they have lost. Love wants to awaken all those who have fallen asleep, bringing back to life all of the dead. History keeps silent regarding the cause of these beings having lost their sublime life. They have experienced a great catastrophe. Their life is a great tragedy. Many legends exist regarding the reasons for this tragedy. The whole of humankind has lived through this tragedy. A new epoch is now coming for humankind, in which the sentient world will show people the way they can return to their primordial life and come to stand on good, solid ground. At present, most people live amid life's illusions. During the involutionary process, that is, during the process of descending into the material, world materialized souls descended through great resistance into the densest matter of the earth. In the process of descending, considerable energy is generated. This is the most difficult path, the path of wisdom. Although the teaching of love, that is to say, the path of ascent or evolution, has been taught to people, they still walk on the most difficult path. The devas, the angels, move along the easiest path, the path of the least resistance. That is to say, the angels move along the path of love, and people along the path of wisdom. Until recently, humankind was descending. As man begins to ascend, he will meet the angels and will come to know them. At present, we are in the transient time between involution and evolution. Because descent is followed by ascent, at the border between the two epochs, that is, In the transient period, the greatest resistance, the greatest suffering exists. This is why there are so many delays and obstacles at present. Nevertheless, once the evolutionary process begins, the forces will be directed upward. Then there will be no obstacles. The methods for development of the Eastern nations were good at one time, but now they cannot be applied as they were in the past. Because we are at the beginning of the evolutionary process and no longer in that of the involutionary when these methods had been given. The methods that the Hindu philosophy has used before are involutionary. Now, new evolutionary methods need to be given to the Western nations. At the boundary between the involutionary and evolutionary epochs is Christ. His coming heralds the beginning of the evolutionary epoch. However, the majority of people today continue to descend. That is, they are still on the involutionary path. In this way, they will not solve their problems. In such a case, another impulse upward toward the sun needs to come. 3 categories of souls exist. Those who are descending are in their involutionary period, those who are ascending are in their evolutionary period, and a 3rd category of souls who have stopped in one place. These are at the lowest point in their development, having not yet begun to ascend. While ascending, should you encounter a being who has stopped, and you connect with this being, he will draw power from you, causing you to lose. Beings also exist with whom you walk in a parallel manner. Here we come to the question of related souls. You should help the others, but without becoming intimately involved. Why is it necessary for man to descend and sink into matter? That he may clothe himself in layer after layer, each one denser than the others, in order to gain experience, and after that begin his ascent by clothing himself in increasingly sublime forms. The final movement will be upward. Those who do not want to connect with God will be tossed by the waves out of the predominant current on the day of the Lord, where they will need to wait for another period of ascent. That is, they will need to wait for another wave. All those who are ascending toward God will enter into heaven, but those from the other period will remain descended, outside of God. The door will be closed to them for a while. Because Christ was mentioned in relation to the beginning of evolution at the beginning of this discourse, one of the brothers asked the Master to say something about Christ. The Master explained, Christ is the transformer of the energy that comes to man from God. Without Christ, man could not ascend to God. Why? It has been said that God is an all-consuming fire. To explain this concept, we can use the following analogy. The sun's energy has such powerful vibrations that should it come directly down to earth, man would not be able to bear it. This is why several transformers exist between the sun and the earth, through which the sun's energy passes. This alone makes solar energy bearable for man. Music, the path of attainment. Music was an integral part of the Master's life. It was his natural environment. The Master worked in accordance with the laws of music. For him, it was not only about the aesthetic of sound, but of life itself. The good life is music, he would say. He played the violin and also sang. As a part of his teaching, he introduced many songs that were a model for the new music. Sometimes he showed us how to sing the songs with his deep, pleasant voice, expressing all the nuances. Not only his voice, but also his expression, posture, deep feelings, and unity of thought and emotion gave an unusual power to each song. Sometimes he accompanied his singing with gestures, which revealed, in a deeper way, the content of the song. In his lectures and sermons, the Master spoke extensively about music, revealing its deep meaning and many-sided applications. The Master once said, "Make use of music for your spiritual development, as do the advanced beings in the sublime world above. The new race that is coming will give a new impulse to music. If someone wants to do something bad, play some music for him, and he will relent. Awaken the divine within this person, and he will listen to its voice. There is always the desire within you to be heard by someone when you sing. Be assured that you have the best audience. The whole of heaven listens when you begin to sing. From above, you receive the best evaluation. Do not be afraid that there is no one above to listen to you. There is an audience above who appreciates your singing. It might happen at times when you cannot reconcile with your neighbor, but once you begin to sing, the song within you will awaken the readiness to reconcile. This is the power of music. Why does one need to sing? So that he may not lose what he has. You are near to the point of attaining something beautiful. Sing that you may not lose it. He who sings is strong, and he who does not sing is weak. Sing because this is what love requires of you. You need to sing so that you may live. Music is the transmitter of real life. No culture can exist without music. You need to visit a meeting of the initiates in order to see what kind of music is there. You need to be in the presence of these initiates when they are singing, to perceive their deep understanding of music, and to comprehend the real meaning of music. For one to become a student of one of these initiates, one first needs to be knowledgeable of contemporary music. One needs to be a very good singer, so that when one goes to them, he will be able to comprehend their music. Once music permeates the world, there will be no more disease. Disease will exist, but one will experience a pleasant feeling while the ailment lasts, and will overcome it easily. When you sing, the divine world opens to you, and you receive divine life. You lose if you do not sing. No matter what happens to you, sing. It is beneficial for you to paint well, to sing well, and to play an instrument well, so that you may know how to accomplish any task. Those vibrations that are curative are included within the process of singing. When an ill person sings or listens to singing, he will recover. Through music, you can bring about a certain degree of realization to what you desire. Through music, things can be brought to fulfillment. What one is singing about can be realized, and what one does not sing about cannot be realized. You cannot go before God if you do not sing. You cannot be a poet if you lack musical sensibility. You cannot go before people and have them love you if you do not sing. On another occasion, the Master said, "The true image of love is musical. He who does not sing, even if he talks about love or whatever else, in reality, sleeps. Uplift and development cannot be accomplished without singing. He who does not know how to sing cannot be a disciple. For the disciple of the divine school, music is one of the important elements that serves as a shield to protect him from internal and external unfavorable conditions. A correlation exists between musical sensibility and the capability for reason. The greater appreciation for music a person has, the greater his ability for reasoning. Singing needs to have 3 elements. It should be activated by sentient love. It should be permeated with faith. And it should be permeated with hope as well. That is to say, man needs to sing with the idea that what he sings about can become realized. Singing needs to be an uninterrupted impulse of life. Without singing, the present life would obliterate everything noble within man. Music heralds the application of the divine virtues. I have in mind music as a method for applying love. If you do not have a musical ear, you cannot love people. Love is a great blessing for all. The first thing that it gives to a person is music. What is love? The science of music. In and of itself, love is elusive. Only he who is musically sensible can understand it. When someone is a bearer of divine love, he speaks musically. When you are attuned, you enter into the experience of each tone. You can come to perceive music as speech, as language. All people whose feelings have hardened lack music within themselves, while those with gentle feelings have music. They can sing or play an instrument, and thus their consciousness is higher than the consciousness of those who do not sing or play music. When one sings, there should always be an object for his song. If a person sings for God, he will be eternally young. He will attain immortality. And after passing through the transition, he will continue to sing in the invisible world. If, however, one sings for the world, he will be forgotten. You need to have an enlightened mind, heart, and soul for the appreciation of music. Having two standards is not acceptable. You need to have only one ideal, to serve God. What will people say about you? Let them say whatever they would like. While singing, think about your internal audience. At the present, people lack the right idea of what music is. The musical genius is a channel of divine energy, and those who listen will receive this energy. The good musician needs to be a good transmitter of the divine. He should give. One needs to sing with inspiration. By singing beautifully, one also perceives beautiful thoughts and feelings. When you listen to talented singers and musicians, you make a connection with advanced beings who manifest themselves through them. The vibrations of these beings penetrate far into space through the voices of these singers and are uplifting to human souls. Few are the songs that are carried through space. Seldom is when an ancient Egyptian or Hindu song can be received. A song or musical piece that does not remain in space is not real music. The subconsciousness, the consciousness, the ego consciousness, and the superconsciousness should all participate in the singing. He who wants to sing well needs to be calm within. If you sustain negative thoughts and feelings within yourselves, you cannot sing or play an instrument. Technically, you can play and sing, but not with your soul. Wisdom makes use of music. From now on, the world of music belongs to wisdom. The performing, the external aspect of music, cannot be manifested without wisdom. Music is a great art. Through it, the character, thoughts, and feelings of a person can be expressed. How can you give musical expression to the vibrations of the mind and of the heart? The heart vibrates rapidly, while the mind vibrates sublimely. Sublime beings apply music readily, whereas it is much harder for ordinary people to apply music. Let an ordinary musician try to correct one of his errors through music. According to a person's musical sensibility, one can discern his character. The more advanced a person's musical sensibility, the more stable his character. You are sad. If you are a violinist, play, and your state will change. Even if you play only one note, your state can change. Today, there are many more musical instruments available than there were in the past. Through them, you can help yourselves change your state. There was never a time when so many musical instruments were available as there is at the present. Good musicians are those who have the knowledge to change positive energy into negative and negative into positive. Have you tried to play or sing in order to change your bitter feelings into sweet ones? You can try in this way to use the power of music. It is good for one to apply music in order to transform one's state. When one is tired or sad, one needs to sing. On another occasion, the Master said, "Music influences the digestion. When your stomach does not function well, sing, and you will see the influence that music has on the digestion of food." The disciple needs to set aside time for singing every day, 10, 15, or 20 minutes, before starting his work. The development of a person's capabilities and talents depends upon singing. When you sing, you give your potential a chance to develop. Every song can be sung either loudly or softly. If you sing loudly, you will attract inferior beings. If you sing softly, you will attract more advanced beings. That person who is not musically sensible, in whom the sense of rhythm is not developed, is not patient and punctual, and lacks a sense of order, whereas he who is musically sensible is patient and punctual and has a sense of order. One can seldom find musicians among murderers or criminals. Because people are not well attuned, they are in different states, and for this reason, not all songs appeal to them equally. Those nations that have had good music have advanced. Some people are opposed to contemporary music being played and sung in pubs and coffee houses. But the singing and playing of music in pubs and coffee houses has contributed a great deal to man's development. One needs to sing because musical dust collects within him that he needs to shake off. When we try to sing and play divine music, we will always make mistakes. This is not because there exists a mistake in divine music, but because we need time to learn how not to make mistakes. You need to learn to attune yourselves. If you do not feel like singing, you may be in a diseased state. If you have the desire to sing, you are healthy. It is possible to sense the music that emanates from a person. Someone thinks that he can easily become a genius. A person needs to serve a singer of genius for thousands of years to observe how he works, what he does. Only then can he become a singer of genius as well. Remember, without music, you can go nowhere. Either you should play an instrument or you should sing. Man's misfortunes are due precisely to the fact that he neither sings nor plays an instrument. He expects someone to come from outside to sing and play for him. All mistakes can be corrected through music. There exist places in nature whose gateways can be opened only by the one who holds the power of music. The war. Today, during the afternoon conversation, a question of the war arose. Several brothers and sisters expressed their opinions. The Master said, "What is war? It is God's anger with the sons of disobedience." In other words, when people commit many crimes, Mars is given the power to unleash war. That is to say, the created karma is paid off through the suffering of humankind. Some people consider it impossible to renounce their father and mother, as well as themselves, that they may serve God as Christ commanded. Are people not currently ordered by law to renounce their families, father, mother, wife, children, to go into battle? If people refuse to make sacrifices voluntarily, they will be forced to do so from without. Everyone can see the impending catastrophe, but not everyone knows how to avoid it. For centuries, unconscious mechanical forces have been accumulating like floodwaters in front of a dam. The strain is so great that catastrophe is inevitable. Soon the dam will give way. The energy that has accumulated within people hides great danger. Until now, this energy remains yet to be utilized. In the past, as well as in the present, people have continued to demonstrate great cruelty. At present, millions of people are becoming the victims of human madness. Afterward, justification is found in external causes. Because of modern technical means of warfare, in the air, on the ground, on the water, as well as under the water, an enormous amount of resources, gas, oil, and so on, are wasted. Nature has strictly defined how much of these goods can be utilized. She severely punishes those who go too far with wastefulness. Humankind will bear the consequences for the squander of these fuels. Unprotected cities are being bombed. These wars are unprecedented. This terror is unprecedented in history. Attacking a city with 2,000 airplanes with high-caliber bombs. Nobody has the right to deprive a human being of what God has given him. If one has a window through which he sees God's light, no one has the right to deprive him of that light. When two blood brothers fight and pull each other's hair, it is not the desire of their father and mother. When nations today fight, this too is not in accordance with the will of God. There exists the tendency to justify the war ideologically by saying, "It is for the good of the nation." Yet what did those who fought for their nations accomplish in the past? Egypt, Syria, Babylon, and Rome were great nations. They fought, but what did they achieve? Nothing. There exists a small group of arms manufacturers who declare wars. As soon as the weaponry has been used, peace comes. After that, the production of arms resumes, no matter that millions of people will become cannon fodder. People say, "Let there be no more war." Yet wars are the result of people's actions. We say, for there to be no more war, people must overcome greed. As long as people do not obey divine law, war will continue to exist. If they obey divine law, they will never engage in combat. The Divine Sculptor. During numerous conversations, the Master gave explanations for the reasons behind suffering. He said, "As it is difficult for one to climb high mountain peaks, so is it difficult to climb the high reaches of spiritual life. Life is climbing a high mountain peak. Someone tells me, 'I moan. I am tormented.' Naturally, you go to the heights, and for this reason, you find it difficult. Man suffers because he has strayed away from God and does not know how to return. Moving away from God leads to deprivation, suffering, misfortune, hardship, disease, and death. The greater the suffering, the greater the turning away. Therefore, in order for this deviation to be set right, you need to return to the primordial life. The reason for man's suffering and hardship lies in the unfulfillment of God's will. The trials in life come in order to discern that which is pure gold from that which is only gilded. What is gold is put to work, whereas whatever is gold-plated is put aside. One should not bring suffering and conflict upon oneself. Sometimes the Spirit comes and tells a person to do something, but he refuses because the conditions are not favorable or because of his own indisposition. Then comes the great difficulties in one's life. The suffering that you have in your life is due to your being without love. Remember that the misconceptions, conflicts, and suffering in your life do not come from God. The suffering and misfortunes in your life are due to a lack of understanding of the great principles and laws that nature is using. The Master once asked, "What do you understand of the concept, the wrath of God?" It indicates that much human error has accumulated, and that sentient nature is using fire to consume all this error. In this way, people are liberated. Suffering indicates that man has come into conflict with the laws of sentient nature. He who does not attain divine wisdom suffers. The lack of understanding of the wholeness of life is the source of suffering. If someone would like to free himself of suffering, he needs to change the direction of his movement. In order to achieve this, he needs to be courageous and resolute. When someone commits a crime, suffering knocks at his door and forces him to begin thinking. God has created a harmonious world, and the existing suffering in this world is the result of man's actions. At first, nature makes the effort to teach us with gentleness, and if we do not comprehend, the storm comes. Nature manifests herself as we are. She conforms to us, and then we understand her language. One brother asked, "Why do good people suffer and not bad ones?" The Master said, "The good gardener prunes the cultivated trees, leaving the wild ones to grow untouched. For how long? Until their turn comes to be pruned. When a sheep is slaughtered, the other sheep stand by and watch, but the same will happen to them too. Their turn has not yet come. To him who has not suffered, suffering is yet to come. To him who has endured suffering to the end, suffering will come no more." When someone suffers, he alone is the reason, because he has missed certain opportunities. He has been delayed for 1 minute, and the train has left the station. When a weak person thinks he has been punished by a strong one, he should not blame the strong person, but say, "I am not smart enough." A strong person never punishes a smart one. The weak person has been punished not because of his weakness, but because he is not smart. The weak should not think of himself as being strong. The moment you stop thinking of yourselves as being strong, punishment will cease. All those who crucify Christ within themselves will burn like wood. This is the suffering through which they will pass. You complain that someone has beaten you. The reason for this is that you are standing too close to him. He who knows why he has been punished attains true initiation. It is necessary for the person who desires to liberate himself of all suffering to be virtuous and possess right thought. When the real life comes, there will be no more tears. After every sadness, something new, something great is born within the human soul. All great ideas are born after great sorrow. Until the new is born within the human soul, man will continue to know suffering. As soon as it is born, he will be filled with joy. Man sees God in times of sorrow. The meaning of suffering. In many of his sermons, as well as in his talks, the Master spoke about sorrow, shedding light upon its deep inner meaning. In those days, it was especially important to enlighten people on this subject. When suffering is understood, it is easier for people to bear it and receive the benefits it brings. The Master said, "Suffering is not punishment. It is given as a lesson." We give a completely different connotation to the word punishment. Punishment means there is a lesson to be learned. If suffering comes to you, do not become disturbed. A specific blessing is hidden within it that will come after you have endured. Do not force the given conditions. Remember, the blessing for which your heart and mind are longing will come in time. Be watchful not to let this blessing pass by. Do not avoid suffering, but profit by it. The Apostle Paul said, "The present sufferings cannot be compared with those great blessings that they bring." At this point, there's a footnote, which reads, "Compare with Romans chapter 8, verse 18. The sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed." End footnote. The psalmist said, "I feel good that I am saddened." Through suffering, love prepares the conditions for new joy to come. The suffering of today is a condition for the future joy. Suffering and sorrows are divine plows that prepare the ground so that the seeds of future virtues will be able to sprout. When someone suffers, he becomes a better person and more sensitive. The awakening of the consciousness does not occur mechanically, but comes through the impulses that come from suffering. The more difficulties a person encounters, the greater the possibilities are for his personal growth. The great people had to endure great ordeals. This does not mean that these great people knew only suffering. They also had joys so great that they are not known to the ordinary people. Mindful suffering. The city of Sophia was desolate and destroyed, burned to the ground. Life withdrew from it, as the city had been abandoned by its people. It was winter time, and the sky was hanging over it, dark and heavy. No light could penetrate through it. One could not see a solution. In those days, when people were coming to see the Master for consolation, they could grasp the meaning of his words more readily and understood that they needed to endure to the end. The Master told them, "He who suffers and endures to the end is a hero. He who suffers is a hero. He will become a true human being. Nothing will become of him who does not suffer. Be thankful to God when a trial comes. All tribulations are a blessing for man. After each trial, he attains something good. In order to polish a stone, one needs to chip and grind it. The same is true for a human being. Polishing, suffering is necessary so that one may awaken. It is difficult for man to become aware. He needs to be boxed into a corner in order to awaken. Every time the consciousness falls asleep, suffering comes to awaken it. After that comes rejuvenation and uplift. Suffering will uplift you. Be joyful that you suffer so that you may bear fruit. God will transform the suffering of people into precious stones that will be placed as a wreath upon their heads. In the future, people's suffering will adorn their heads. When nature puts someone in restraints, she has his best interests in mind and has, as her goal, the awakening of the hidden forces within him. All suffering, constraints, and trials in a person's life aim to awaken the higher consciousness within him. When nature imposes sorrow, we feel wrongly toward it. When a mother puts her child in the tub to bathe him, he cries and thinks that this is bad. The child does not understand that his mother means to do well for him. An army general was tried, convicted, stripped of all his rights, and sent to jail. Only after 10 years was he released. He then said, "I now understand life. It has become clear to me that my position as a general and all other things are nonsense." A person whose skull had been broken several times grows wiser. When one suffers, he gradually sets right his thinking. When the thinking is set right, the consciousness awakens. Through suffering, a new consciousness arises in man. This is the meaning of suffering. The gifts that living nature gives to man are meaningful tribulations. Within them are hidden the experiences that enable man to develop. The fruit of these tribulations are the impulses that help him to grow. As many trials as are necessary are given to every person for the development of his soul. These trials are not arbitrary. When I speak about them, I am referring to mindful suffering. Man has come to his present development because of his hardship and trials. These prepare man for the coming of love. The uppermost limit. The Master told us, the ordinary person is unable to suffer in the way that the greatest ones do. Suffering comes according to the degree of development. When you come to pass through the trials of Job and of Christ, you will attain a new idea of life. If you do not pass through these trials, you will never come to comprehend the secrets of creation. Man has not yet reached the uppermost limits of suffering in order to leave his human nature and become like an angel. You need to pass through two conditions, the greatest sorrow and the greatest joy. After that, you will come to understand the real inner meaning of life. Finally, you will come to that bliss in which all things are harmonious. This cannot be explained in the human language. Within nature, one great law predominates. Human souls develop through suffering, and through it, they learn the great mysteries of life. Every suffering is an open door through which one comes to know God. Without suffering, people could not come close to God. This is the path on earth. The angels come close to God through joy. Suffering is the path on which man walks, so that he may develop the divine within. Through suffering and trials, you become humble, so that you may see God. Only then can you comprehend his greatness. You will come to realize that you are a wanderer on this earth who has come here to learn. A servant needs to serve first a bad master so that he will be able to appreciate the good one afterward. Storms are needed to clear away the fog within you. Then the sun will shine. When suffering comes, transform it into a virtue. He who has suffered greatly will become gentle and virtuous. Without suffering, you cannot attain gentleness or virtue. Through suffering, one gradually changes and finally makes the choice to lead a pure and holy life. Trials in life. Once the Master explained about the trials in life. Each hardship is a trial that one needs to endure. When a trial comes into your life, tell yourself, this trial has come so that I may correct one of my faults. When someone attains self-control, the hardships and suffering will vanish. The suffering of the present times heralds a new life for which refined matter needs to be prepared. As a result of the suffering, the matter of the brain will become more and more refined. To suffer means to send down roots deep into the ground and to work. Through suffering, conflicts, and contradictions, you acquire experience with the great laws that direct life. The contradictions that exist in the present life will not be repeated in the future one. What represents the end of suffering? Awareness. If you become more aware after you have suffered, you will give thanks, because this suffering has been meaningful. If, after having suffered, you have not attained awareness, the suffering was not meaningful. When the ground has been cultivated, this represents suffering, a cataclysm for the worms and ants. On the other hand, the new culture is sown in the soil through this cultivation. Human suffering is similar to this cultivation, through which the new culture is sown in human souls. In order to cleanse your body, you use a washcloth. Through suffering, the human body is cleansed from within. If the human body is not cleansed from within, divine thought cannot be correctly transmitted. Through hardship, the nervous system is purified. When every nerve is purified, then man can properly receive all divine light and thought. Why does suffering come? For the sole purpose of eliminating the impurities in the brain. The angels understand the profound meaning of the suffering of humankind. They know that the blessing for humankind is hidden within it. The great people of genius did not have the best conditions of life, whereas those who have had good conditions have achieved very little. The working conditions of Beethoven were very poor. Suffering impels man to work. It is very hard to overcome difficulties and suffering, but it needs to be done. Christ overcame them and ascended. One day, when you complete your development, you will thank God for all the misfortunes in your life. These are where the greatest blessings have come from. Through suffering, man is tested and becomes tempered. The roots. The Master once told us, it has been predetermined that some people can only learn from their own mistakes. If one would talk to them, they would not comprehend. People like this learn on the path of suffering. When there is something in your life that causes you to suffer, know that God is preventing you from taking a wrong turn. Knowing about the great misfortune that could befall you, Providence sends trials. To prevent this misfortune, Providence sends a smaller suffering. Each failure is a future success. This means that there is something to work toward. Suffering represents a great divine science. Without it, man cannot learn. Suffering brings knowledge. When trees are planted close together, they grow thin and tall. When they are planted at a greater distance apart, they grow strong and full. The same is true with people. Under difficult conditions, they become idealistic. Under normal conditions, they become materialistic. In nature, there exists a law. As long as you have not cried, you cannot grow. Either you need to cry, or someone else needs to cry for you. If you cry for someone, you are helping him. People consider weeping a weakness, but it is not. Not a single being exists who has never wept. Suffering is the roots. Be glad for the roots. The branches are the joys. Be glad for the branches. No tree exists without roots. In this way, suffering and joy complement each other. Consequently, the fruit of the tree is the divine world. It is not that we want suffering, but it is a necessity. Suffering represents plowing. Joy represents sowing. Suffering needs to be transformed into joy. What has been sown needs to sprout. Ordinary people suffer as well as great people, but with this difference. Ordinary people suffer and become embittered, whereas great ones suffer and progress. In all of life's trials, man needs to serve God alone, the one idea alone. And if he does not give in to the temptation and trials, he will come to know himself. Suffering with love. The Master said, "If, in spite of difficulties, man continues to walk on the path of life without stumbling, he is strong. He who is strong endures all trials. Suffering is a heavy burden that we drag upward. It is fortunate that there are sentient beings who help us. God says, 'Ask for me in days of sorrow.'" At this point, there's a footnote which reads, "See Psalm 50, verse 15, 'Call upon me in days of trouble.'" End of footnote. Through his trials and suffering, man can determine the degree of his development. If his spirit is strong, he endures. If you suffer and bear your suffering with joy, you have love. The more man progresses, the greater are the suffering, trials, and tribulations that he encounters in life. Be thankful that you have difficulties so that you may come to know your character and the strength of your belief. Man needs to be ready to renounce everything for love, wisdom, and truth. It is utterly disagreeable to me when I see that someone suffers without love. It is something else if you have the consciousness, the courage to suffer for truth. This, however, is only possible with love. What would I gain if I subjected you to trials, persecutions, and hunger for my own sake? If in your souls the profound desire arises to come to know God and the whole of life, your suffering will be mindful. This is suffering with love. When I meet such a person, I am ready to embrace and congratulate him. If you do not suffer with love, I will tell you, "Brother, you cause me great sorrow." Why? Because you suffer without love. Why is it that God, who is perfect and all-knowing, has allowed these contradictions? So that he may test your love. God asks, "Can you love me after all the suffering?" If you can love me, your love is true. But if you love me only after I have given you the greatest bounties, this is to be expected. God has put people under these conditions now in order to separate out, as if by putting them through sieves. After he has tested them, he will accept them into his kingdom. He will give them power, knowledge, and wisdom with which to reign the world. When a certain trial is given to someone, he can endure it. No trial given to a person exceeds his endurance. When suffering comes to you, put on your new clothes. And when you have endured it, take off your new clothes, put on your usual clothes, and become like all others. When you are sad, rise above your sadness. Many of your troubles are illusory. In the earthly life, there will always be disappointments. Someone is a great actor and is accustomed to being applauded. When he becomes old, people will applaud someone else. He says, "How beautiful it was at one time." In the future, this person will again have good conditions. Life does not consist of one day alone. Suffering is only for a moment. It lasts for a short time. The wrath of God lasts only for a moment, yet his mercy endures forever. Two extremes exist. Too much suffering is superfluous, but to be without any suffering is the other extreme. You need to have at least a few pennies worth of suffering. We lack compassion for people who suffer. We also lack compassion for the animals to which we cause suffering. When a person suffers, he needs to wait for the sun to rise. As soon as the sun rises, the suffering disappears. When you pass through a trial, think of all the beings who suffer and say, "Many people suffer with me." People with awareness stand above suffering. The human spirit is above everything. There is no power that can crush it. Therefore, Man needs to overcome suffering. You have endured so many things in the past, but you have forgotten. There was a time when there were many volcanic eruptions and lava flows, during which people have been buried in the ashes and in the lava. So much has man endured on earth. A new culture is coming. Everything that has happened will be forgotten. As long as one is ill, he thinks he will never forget about his illness. But as soon as the illness goes away, he forgets about it, as if it were only a dream. Freedom. This morning we went with the Master to the Wellspring. It had snowed during the night. The sky was clear, but some snowflakes were still falling. They sparkled like diamonds and made the air even more refreshing. A gentle breeze was blowing. When we reached the small peak above the wellspring, we gathered around the Master. One of the brothers said, "Master, tell us something about freedom." The Master looked for a long time at the vista in front of us. The bright sunlight made him glad. He was breathing in the fresh air with concentration, as if he were tasting life itself. Then he looked at us and said, "Freedom can exist only where God is. If one thinks in the way that God thinks, he is free. Only he who is perfect is free. The only perfect being is God. In the absolute meaning of the word, free only means God. Therefore, without God, you cannot be free. Without God, there is no life. Free is the one who serves God. If you search for freedom, serve God. He who serves people is not free, neither is the one who is served by people. To discover the law of love is to discover your freedom. Freedom does not come before love. This is where all are in error. We desire to be free before we begin to love. Freedom comes as the result of love. The love that does not set one free is not love. If you desire to be strong, allow God's love to manifest through you. Love makes man his own master. People are influenced by dark forces. You do things that you do not wish to do. This indicates that you are influenced. The invisible world comes now to set you free from this influence. You need to become masters of these circumstances. Do not permit beings who stand beneath you to command you. In order for one to liberate himself from those lower beings, he must have love. The moment one comes to know love, every crime, every transgression will vanish. Therefore, until people come to know love, transgressions and crimes will exist. He who does not cope with his karma and subjects himself to it is not free. Only the love of God dissolves karma. Karma is a heavy, sticky mud that is difficult to wash away. Only love can eliminate it. Human karma can be eliminated only through love. That is to say, the love for God. Your conditions in life will improve when you lay down love as the foundation of your life. In the life of love, there is no karma. Two laws exist, the law of karma and the law of dharma. One enters the law of dharma through love. Everyone can try this. If you have love in your heart, even the biggest snake that comes across your path will yield to your way and will not harm you. The son receives his share in his inheritance when he comes of age. As the relationship of the father is to his sons, so it is of nature to humankind. At present, man is in his age of infancy and lives according to the law of necessity. When he reaches adulthood, he will live according to the law of freedom. Pedagogical Questions. Many of the brothers and sisters were teachers. They used the methods of education given by the master, and when they went to visit him, they shared their experiences. The master listened to them with great attention, developed the methods further, and added to what he had already given. He introduced them to the methods of sentient nature, showing them how they could be applied in the schools. In this way, he laid the foundation for a new educational system. Once during a hike in the mountains, questions concerning child education arose. The master said, "The educational system needs to be changed. Something new needs to be introduced. The human spirit strives for new ways and methods through which the divine life can be manifested on earth. All of you need to contribute something to the new culture. Something new needs to be introduced in the human education to completely change people's concept of life. Some of the educational methods that are used today are little more than training. You educate a person under certain circumstances, but when he is placed under different conditions, he slips back into his old ways. Children are knowledgeable, but the window through which they are looking is too small. As the child becomes older, the window becomes larger. The abilities of the child are within him. God has implanted the new in man, and it comes from within. The educator needs only to create the conditions for the development and growth of what is implanted in the soul by God, and not try to seed their souls with his own ideas. In contemporary education, we want to make the child like us. This is wrong. Instead, we should give the child the impulse to develop what is already implanted within him. If a student is nervous, let him be nervous. The one who is quiet, let him be quiet. You can make him jump, but this is unnatural for him. You can divide the human life into periods of 7 years, but from another point of view, you can divide it into periods of 33 years. In his 33rd year, every human being, consciously or unconsciously, enters the spiritual life. Something within him finds a balance. In his 66th year, man enters into wisdom. After this age, he is already living in the divine world. The soul and spirit manifest within him. This needs to be applied in education, because in the first 10 years, an impulse is given that will bear fruit during the corresponding period. There is a law according to which you cannot give to others what you do not have. You cannot convince people of something if you yourself do not believe in it. You cannot awaken the good in man if you do not possess it within yourself. The same applies to knowledge and love. This law should be applied to education. The education of a child is in his mother's hands. What the mother brings to the child during pregnancy is important. After that, after the child is born, it is more difficult to educate him. Therefore, I say, mothers will put the world in order. During pregnancy, the mother can inspire her child toward wisdom and intelligence. She can influence his feelings and also strengthen his will. After the birth, the connection between mother and child continues, but in a different way. A child whose mother does not hold him in her arms loses something valuable. There is a connection between the physical bodies of the mother and the child. Therefore, the child should not live far away from his mother until at least the age of 14 or 15. What the mother can give her child in 1 year, his relatives and environment cannot give him in 20 years. Statistics show that children who have grown up until the age of 20 with the love of their parents possess nobler character than those who have been deprived of their parents' love. The law states, If the parent's love toward their child is weak, the child is more likely to become ill. In order for you to be healthy, the love of your mother needs to permeate your soul fully. If the father and the mother have thought of committing a crime, and the son to whom they have given birth could think of this as well. Therefore, people need to be pure, that is to say, have pure thoughts and feelings. When a person has a negative thought, it can incarnate with a child. When you, as a mother, caress your child's head, say to him, "May divine thoughts enter you. May you carry light to humankind. May you help your weaker brethren. May noble thoughts permeate you." He who treats plants and animals well will be kind to people as well. This is the morality of the new culture. The mother needs to teach the child that divine life permeates the whole of nature, the flowers, the trees, the little flies, and the birds, everything. As long as the child believes that the teacher does not lie, the teacher has authority. However, if he notices that the teacher is not telling the truth, the teacher no longer has any authority over the child. The same is true for parents. Never speak in a negative way. Do not do this. Do not do harm. But instead say, do good. Instead of the words, do not lie, say, speak the truth. The less you speak about negative things, the better. We should speak about the positive. Sometimes, when a gifted child passes beyond, he helps from there and uplifts a less gifted child on earth. One brother asked the master, "Is the relationship between family members maintained in future reincarnations?" The master answered, "It is retained according to the love existing between them." There are 3 kinds of students, and you need to take these 3 types into consideration. First, there are students of the objective mind. Their learning is based on facts, on observation. Second, there are students of the literary mind. These are students who can go from the facts to the laws. And third, there are students of the philosophical mind who go from the facts to the laws and from the laws to the principles. When you work with students, you need to consider these differences and know how to work with each group of students. One woman, a teacher, said, "Because I cannot know who is from which group, and because I need to work with all students, I will provide food in my lectures for all 3 kinds of students, of facts, of laws, and of principles. In this way, everyone will perceive and comprehend that which is necessary for him." The master continued, "It is impossible to educate 2 people in the same manner. There exist as many different educational methods as there are people on earth. In their education, the same principle can be applied, but never the same method. The failure of contemporary culture is due to the teacher using the same method of education for every child. This is a mechanical understanding. If a child makes a face, do not pay attention. Before the teacher enters the classroom, the whole room is in a cloud of dust. When the teacher enters, he should not show discontent, but tell the students to open the window for a while. The primary thing is to not pay attention when children are not keeping quiet. For example, if one child has stolen a piece of fruit, the teacher should call him over and give him a whole bag of fruits. When working with children, one needs to be very patient. One female teacher told me that when she asked a student to go to the blackboard to present the lesson, he did not want to. And so the teacher became angry. But if I were her, I would let this student be if he does not want to speak, and I would ask the next one to do it instead. If he also does not want to, I would ask another one. On another occasion, I would ask that student who does not want to stand up now. And if he does not want to participate again, I would let him be once more. After a few attempts, he will be ready to get up and talk. One sister asked, "If a student is noisy and disruptive, what should I do?" The master replied, "Go to this child and begin speaking with him. Ask him, 'What is the name of your father and of your mother? What does your father do? Do you have any brothers and sisters? What are their names? How old are they?' and so on. Then this child will become closer to you and will become well behaved. You need to possess those methods that cultivate good thoughts and feelings. The educational method of today is mechanical. It is only concerned with the sorting of facts." Another sister asked, "The students ask me many questions, and once a month I discuss them in class. How should I handle these questions?" The master responded, "First, let the students try to answer these questions by themselves. For those students who cannot answer, you will explain. The teacher needs to build on whatever the students already have given within themselves. They carry within themselves great treasures. The teacher needs only to help these treasures be discovered. The teacher should tell this to the students and help them realize that they carry these treasures. Speak to the students about the love that brings health, about the wisdom that liberates from contradictions, and about the truth that liberates from limitations. The young generation can be set right only in the following 3 ways: through the law of love, the law of wisdom, and the law of truth. If you rely on the law of love, right life will manifest. If you rely on the law of wisdom, right ideas and knowledge will manifest. If you rely on the law of truth, freedom will be brought forth. These 3 laws need to be united into one. For love, you should begin with eating. What do I mean by this? For example, those who are eating need to share their food with others. This is the way the manifestation of love begins. Love needs to begin with material things. Education should begin first with eating food, drinking water, breathing air, and absorbing light. In the primary school, the child needs to learn to create through his heart and imagination, and in the secondary school, through his heart and mind. If an educator wants to put his student on the right path, but appeals only to his mind or his heart, he will not get results. But if he speaks to his soul as well, there will be results. When some students are not quiet and are naughty, it is because they know that the teacher does not love them. In such a case, the teacher needs to find one good aspect of their character and begin to love them, and they will be transformed. When they are naughty, they are saying, "See, we are just as you think of us. We behave according to your opinion. You think that we are not good, do you not? And so we are not." In teaching, as well as in child rearing, the child needs to learn from nature. Growing flowers should be used as a method in the new system of education. The child should study the flowers. He needs to learn to love them. In every schoolyard, there should be a garden. It is necessary to have something that can serve as a channel for the divine impulses: cherries, apples, plums, pears, quinces, walnuts, and others. Yellow flowers transmit intelligence. Red ones, vitality and health. When you encourage children to plant flowers, yellow, red, white, the flowers will educate them through their colors. In every school, it is necessary to have a garden where children can work. We also need to know the right proportion. How many apple, plum, pear, and other fruit trees to plant, and what influence each tree will have. Each tree that the child grows influences him. In such a way, everything in nature acts educationally. Fruit trees teach children generosity, love, the service of giving and helping others. It is necessary to explain to the children that these trees give their fruit without asking for anything except that we sow their seeds. Tell the children, be hard workers like the bees, be persistent like the plant, be strong and firm like the oak. Nobody should cause you to deviate from your ideas. Nature needs to be studied in such a manner. If you had given such explanations to the children, you would have obtained quite different results. All of these children would have given a new impulse to humankind. The first method with which to begin the new education is music. One thing that I would like is for Bulgarians to be musical. Music should work in their minds and in their hearts. In schools, special attention should be paid to music as an important educational factor. Panurhythmy, and at this point there's a footnote, Panurhythmy, or supreme cosmic rhythm, includes movements combined with music and words performed outdoors. End footnote. Should be introduced into the schools. The 1 hour a day used for Panurhythmy will prepare a new generation. You can create an organic geometry that would be very interesting for the students. This means you should study the forms and lines that are encountered in living nature. In child education, every form has some influence in a specific way. A pear and a bunch of grapes are angelic creations. Angels are the true artists. In the future, we will not talk to children about good and bad, about straight and curved lines, about singing in tune. There will be no moralizing. Geometry and music will be used to speak to them with drawings and lines about life. The figures and forms of nature will be studied and interpreted. If I were a teacher, I would write many children's stories, stories that would be accessible to them, to emphasize to the children through these fairy tales that when man does good, he gains, and that when he does wrong, he loses. He will lose his strength or his wealth or his beauty, and so on. I would tell them stories about stones, flowers, trees, and animals. With a child of genius, the soil in which he is sown is very rich. His internal and external conditions are very good. In such conditions, it is very easy to work. With a talented child, the soil is not so good, and still less so with the ordinary child. And yet, from the ordinary children, the talented can be brought forth, and from the talented, those of genius. For every 10 ordinary children, 1 who is talented is necessary, and for every 10 talented children, 1 of genius. If there are no children of genius among the students, the last ones cannot develop correctly. The children of genius and the talented ones will be an inspiration to the ordinary ones. I would place 1 dishonest child between 2 honest and conscientious ones. They will influence him, educate him. If a child is too generous, I would place him between 2 selfish children in order to balance his goodness. In such a way, everybody will benefit. Man should not study only in order to earn his living. Knowledge is necessary for human development, and not for earning a living. One should love knowledge and not look at it as a profession. If he thinks of knowledge as a condition for earning a living, man will gradually become decadent. If he receives it with love, he will be uplifted. This needs to be applied in education. The new teaching that the Universal Brotherhood of Light is bringing should first be applied in the schools. The right conditions in which to grow to maturity need to be given to the young people who are coming now. They come with great potential.